Welcome to Lumina, the House of Education. This podcast exists to make a difference. Here, real stories from classrooms, schools, and education systems are brought together to reshape what education is meant to be in modern times. We talk about leadership, responsibility, values, and the human side of learning. This is a space for education leaders who are done reacting and ready to lead. Let's begin.
I want you to just picture something for a second. You know, a standard hotel conference room.
Yeah.
You know, the one beige walls, that weird geometric carpet, and it smells like vaguely of stale coffee.
Right. And the fluorescent lights are just humming a little too loud.
Exactly. And usually, you know, you'd be looking at a PowerPoint on curriculum standard 4.2 or something, and half the room is just fighting to stay awake.
Yeah.
But in this one room in Concord, New Hampshire, the scene is, well, it's completely different. It is absolute chaos.
Okay.
Prince's Raspberry Beret is just blasting over the speakers. And the room is full of adults. We're talking teachers, social workers, counselors, and they're not taking notes. They're holding these little wooden rhythm sticks. And they're banging them on the tables to the beat. They're laughing. Some of them are even dancing.
So just to be clear, this isn't like the after party or something.
No alcohol.
Yeah.
This is 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. It's a state-funded professional development workshop. And that whole scene, you know, adults drumming to 80s pop, it's actually the front line of a really desperate battle against teacher burnout.
It's such a great image to start with because it really highlights this massive disconnect. On the surface, it just looks like fun, right?
Yeah.
It looks like a break. But if you look closer, it's really a triage unit. We're looking at a whole stack of reports today, from news investigations, data from the RAND Corporation, research from the University of Delaware, and they all suggest we are way past the point of just being tired. We're in the territory of physiological collapse.
And that's the mission for our discussion today. We aren't just going to sit here and say teaching is hard. I mean, everyone knows teaching is hard.
Right.
We're going to look at the data that proves this burnout is actually a form of secondary trauma. And then we're going to unpack these really unorthodox ways schools are trying to fix it. We're talking drumming, calming rooms that look like spas, on-site clinicians.
And we have to ask the hard question, you know, are these real solutions, or are we just putting a really expensive Band-Aid on a hemorrhage?
Let's get into the numbers first, because burnout is such a buzzword. You know, it gets thrown around so much it starts to lose its meaning.
Yeah.
But the data you pulled from the RAND Corporation, it suggests this isn't just people needing a nap.
No, not at all. It's structural. And that RAND survey is really the gold standard for this kind of workforce data. They found that principals and teachers, they're reporting frequent job-related stress at twice the rate of the general working adult population.
Wait, twice the rate. So you take a high-stress corporate job, I don't know, a project manager, with tight deadlines. Teachers statistically double that.
Correct. And that includes people in high-pressure finance or tech roles. But it gets even darker when you look at the clinical side of it. There was a coalition of mental health orgs in New Orleans that did this fascinating and honestly pretty disturbing study.
Right.
They weren't just looking for self-reported stress. They were screening for actual clinical pathology.
And what did they find?
They found rates of anxiety at 36%, depression at 35%, and PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, at 19%.
19% for PTSD.
Yeah.
That's staggering. I mean, we usually associate those kinds of numbers with ER doctors or, you know, first responders, not the person teaching your third grader multiplication.
It's what psychologists call secondary traumatic stress, STS. It happens when you are constantly exposed to the trauma of other people.
So teachers are just absorbing the trauma of their students day in and day out.
Constantly. And this connects directly to the research from Leigh McLean at the University of Delaware. Her lab found that depression and anxiety levels among elementary teachers are currently 100 to 400% higher than they were pre-pandemic.
Hold on, 400%. That's not a trend. That's an explosion. But why? I mean, the pandemic was hard. I get it. But we're a couple of years out. Why are the numbers still climbing?
Because the entire baseline shifted. McLean's research points out something really crucial. This burden isn't equal. You know, early career teachers and teachers of color are getting hit the hardest. But the driver isn't just catch-up work. It's that teachers are now dealing with students who missed 2 whole years of social emotional development.
Right, so you have a fourth grader who basically has the emotional regulation of a first grader.
Exactly. So you've got a teacher who's trying to teach a complex curriculum to meet testing standards while also managing a room full of just dysregulated nervous systems. And then you add the political polarization, what can be taught, books being banned.
And the fear of violence, the
Oh,
school shooting drill.
the drills, the lockdowns, yeah. It creates this state of hypervigilance. Your body is just constantly waiting for a threat.
Okay, so this brings us back to the drumming. Because when I first read about the regulated classroom, that's the program in New Hampshire run by this woman, Emily Daniels, my cynic radar went off hard.
I can imagine.
I thought, okay, so schools are spending thousands of dollars to let teachers play with drumsticks. Are we just infantilizing professionals here?
And that's a fair critique.
No.
If you look at it through a corporate lens, it looks silly. But if you look at it through a physiological lens, specifically polyvagal theory, it's actually, it's quite sophisticated.
Polyvagal theory. Break that down for us. This
Yeah.
is the science of safety, right?
In simple terms, yes. It deals with the vagus nerve, which connects your brain to your body. So when you're in that state of hypervigilance we just talked about, fight or flight, your prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of your brain, it essentially goes offline. You can't think yourself calm when you are in survival mode.
So a PowerPoint on wellness or an email telling you to remember to breathe is basically useless.
It's totally useless because the brain isn't even receiving it. That's top-down processing, and the door is locked. Emily Daniels' approach with the drumming, that's bottom-up processing. Rhythm is predictable. When you bang a stick on a table on a steady beat and everyone around you is doing the same thing, it sends this primal signal to your brainstem that says, we are in sync, we are safe.
So you're basically hacking the nervous system.
It's co-regulation. You're using the body to tell the brain it's okay to stand down, and Daniels argues that you can't teach and students can't learn until that switch gets flipped.
There's this quote from a teacher in the source material, Karen Bowden-Gurley, a fifth grade teacher. And she said she went to the workshop for her own burnout, but then realized, wait, I'm feeling the students' burnout.
Yes.
She said, we forgot that they haven't been in school. I need to train my brain to handle their energy.
That's the key insight. Dysregulation is contagious. If a teacher is stressed, the kids get stressed.
And if the kids are wild, the teacher panics.
Yeah.
It's a feedback loop.
A total feedback loop. And the drumming is an attempt to break that loop physically, since we can't seem to break it administratively.
And it seemed to work for them. There was another teacher, Kelly Hurd, a kindergarten teacher, who said it gave her permission to have fun, which is kind of heartbreaking, isn't it?
It is.
That you need permission to enjoy a room full of 5-year-olds.
It just highlights how industrialized education has become. Fun is seen as time-off task. But biologically, play is how we reduce cortisol. It's a survival mechanism, not a luxury.
So drumming is one tactic, but it's relatively low cost, right? Buy some sticks, do a workshop. But then I was going through the AP News report, and I saw districts throwing serious money at this, like real infrastructure.
And this is where the federal COVID relief funds come in. A lot of districts had this one-time flush of cash, and some of them, like Houston School District, decided to build calming rooms.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here again. When I hear calming room, I just think of a beanbag chair in a corner that nobody uses because they're afraid of looking lazy.
That is a totally valid fear. If the culture doesn't support it, the room is useless. But listen to the description from Sean Ricks. He's the crisis intervention manager in Houston. These aren't just break rooms in the vending machine.
Right.
They're designing these spaces with aromatherapy, specific lighting, soft music. They are explicitly no work zones.
So it's a sanctuary.
It's an acknowledgement of sensory overload. Schools are loud, they're bright, they're chaotic. If you have that PTSD level sensitivity we talked about, you need a place to chemically decompress. Ricks calls them mindfulness breaks.
But here's the friction point, Wami. You build this lovely room. Does a teacher actually have time to go there? I mean, if you have a 25-minute lunch and you have to prep and call a parent, when are you going to go sniff the lavender?
That is the massive operational flaw. A room without time is just a museum exhibit. But some districts are trying to address that. Look at Atlanta Public Schools. They partnered with Emory University on something called Urgent Behavioral Health Response.
This one really impressed me. They aren't just giving you a pamphlet for a therapist.
No, they are funding 11 clinicians to provide emotional assistance during school hours.
That's the game changer. During school hours.
Right. It treats mental health care, like the school nurse. You know, if you twist your ankle, you go to the nurse right now. If you're having a panic attack, you see the clinician right now. It normalizes it.
And Delaware is doing something similar, hiring coaches just for teachers. And then there's an elementary school in Indiana-Obannon Elementary that has institutionalized it. Mindful Mondays, thoughtful Thursdays.
Which I love because it builds a routine. But I know what you're thinking, and what our listener is probably thinking. Does any of this actually improve education?
You read my mind.
Or are we just making teachers feel nicer while test scores are tanking?
It's like, we're investing millions. What's the ROI?
The ROI is in the CARE program data. It stands for Cultivating Awareness and Resilience in Education. They did a controlled study in New York City with 224 teachers. And this wasn't just asking, do you feel better? They were measuring classroom interactions.
Yeah.
They found statistically significant reductions in teacher distress, which you would expect, but they also found significant improvements in the quality of classroom instruction and student engagement.
So, a happier teacher equals a smarter kid. Is it that simple?
A regulated teacher equals a safe kid, and a safe kid equals a learning kid. Tish Jennings from UVA, who led the study, she points out that when a teacher is stressed, they're reactive. You know, they snap at a student or they just check out mentally. The CARE program trains them to catch that stress early.
So it actually benefits the learner as much as the teacher. It's almost an efficiency hack.
Exactly. You lose so much instructional time to behavioral management. If you can reduce those outbursts through teacher regulation, you actually gain teaching time.
I want to pivot here because we've talked about the drumming, the rooms, but the Lumina source material touches on something much deeper, this heaviness of the job. It really feels like we're watching the actual definition of teacher change in real time, and the system just hasn't caught up.
That is the most profound takeaway from all of this research, I think. If you look at the job description from, say, 1990 versus today, the scope creep is just unbelievable.
Scope creep is the perfect term for it.
Teachers are not just instructors anymore. They are the front line of the social safety net. They're food distributors, they're amateur psychologists, they're active shooter defense guards.
And yet the structure of the day is still, here's your 45 minutes for math, here's your 45 minutes for reading.
Right. The Lumina text talks about a shift from control to stewardship. And
Yeah.
it argues that schools run on this shared trust, but that trust is being exploited. We're relying on the moral conscience of individual teachers to fill all the gaps the budget doesn't cover.
It's that concept of moral injury. I've heard that term. It's the distress you feel when you know what a child needs. Maybe it's one-on-one therapy, maybe it's just a quiet hour, and you physically cannot give it to them.
That's it. That's the burnout. It's not just I'm working too hard. It's I am failing these children despite working as hard as I possibly can. And that is just soul-crushing.
And that's why the drumming matters, I guess. Not because it fixes the system,
No,
but because it keeps the person alive inside the system.
it preserves the human element. The text mentions that despite all the admin burdens, the shortages, the doors still open every single morning. And they only open because individuals choose to carry that weight.
So where does this all leave us? We've gone from a hotel room dance party to some pretty dark stats about PTSD to these rooms that smell like eucalyptus.
If I had to synthesize it, I'd say we are witnessing the end of the infinite resource myth. For a century, we just assumed teachers were an infinite resource of care and energy. We thought we could just keep dumping society's problems on them and they just absorb it.
And the sponge is full.
The sponge is dry, it's crumbling. And these programs, the drumming, the on-site therapy, this is the system finally admitting that care is infrastructure.
Yeah.
You cannot build a school system on the backs of traumatized people. It's biologically impossible to have a high-performing school with a dysregulated staff.
So it's not a perk, it's a prerequisite.
It is a prerequisite, exactly.
Which leads me to a final thought I want to leave you with. We've been talking about patching the current model, add a room here, a workshop there. But if the role of a teacher has fundamentally changed from instructor to crisis manager and emotional steward, does the 19th century model of school even work anymore?
That's the big question, isn't it?
I mean, we run on an agrarian calendar, we have an industrial factory bell schedule, but we're doing the work of high-level social therapy, so maybe we don't need a calming room. Maybe we need to burn down the whole schedule and rebuild it to match the reality of today. Because you can't drum your way out of a structural collapse forever.
We're just patching the hull of a ship that was never built for these waters. It might be time to design a new boat.
Something to think about. Thanks for exploring this heavy but really vital topic with us today.
Thanks for having me. It's good to look under the hood.
We'll catch you in the next analysis. Take care of yourselves out there.
Education doesn't change through slogans. It changes when leaders are willing to look again at what really matters. If this episode raised a question worth sitting with, then it did its job. This is Lumina, the House of Education. We'll continue the conversation tomorrow.